You, like most people who watch this channel, are probably a Minecraft player. And what are people who play Minecraft known for? Well, they are known for building, right? They are able to build these fantastical, enormous structures or the most detailed, tiny home. They're able to build the most amazing, honestly, pieces of art. Now, though that is what Minecrafters are known for, I find myself not really meeting that bar. I am not the greatest of builders, and I honestly have never really been that amazing at it. However, this doesn't mean that I've never wanted to improve my building skills. So today we're going to try and see how much I can build in an allotted amount of time. Almost like Build Battle, except kind of against myself. And then once the time is up, I can sort of analyze what I've made and kind of tweak it if I feel like I need to. But anyways, let's get into the first build. All right, so here we are with all of our plots, and we're gonna go in ascending order up here. And our first plot here, we're gonna build something in 5 minutes. All right, so I've gone and done two things. I've set up sort of an atmosphere for this plot just to kind of make it a little more lived in as I'm building it. And I have also gone and chosen a bit of a block palette here. Now, that probably means I'll still have to go into my creative inventory to look for certain items, like I need this fence right now, I just remembered. But the purpose of these items is to just kind of give me a bit of a head start so I can focus all of the 5 minutes on just the build. Now, with that out of the way, let's get started. All right, so what are we trying to build here? We're practically attempting to build a sort of traveling trader's cart centered around the idea of a character named, let's call him Jerry, trying to sell his goods to the rest of the world. He's not the greatest salesman, but he sets up along any kind of road. And to kind of formulate that in this build, we just got a really tiny cart, something that's not very efficient, is not great at its job, but it works. It works. It's been in this guy Jerry's family for a very long time, and it's effective. Now, onto more of the sort of building stuff. We are currently clearly using spruce quite a lot as kind of our base bottom undercarriage kind of structure, and wheels. We are also using copper for this because, well, copper is just a really nice block to kind of show the age of a build, and I really wanted to keep copper going with it. I've also added these campfires here as kind of like a little extended bit. I like to kind of think of this build as kind of like growing over time. Like it got really, really crowded with a lot of different supplies. So this guy, Jerry, the card owner, is struggling to kind of keep all of his stuff together, but he needs more space to sell more stuff to extend his product line. So it's kind of just an amalgamation of a lot of different stuff. So here we kind of bring in barrels and eventually a couple beehives just to kind of show where the product that this guy's selling even really is. I really want this build to feel very compacted, very overcrowded, and very just overused, if that makes sense. Like it's just completely every single part of this build is being used for something, and I just want that vibe to kind of be shown by just how many like barrels and beehives there are showing all the product. Now, here we get to one of my more preferred and honestly favorite parts of the build, which is the roof. I love the roof because, again, it uses a copper, which just shows how weathered it is. It's a great block just for showing age, and I honestly love it for that. But on top of that, it uses these supports that are using levers that are coming out at a diagonal, as if, again, the build is being added onto progressively. By doing this, there is so much more like ricketiness and like just makeshift, like custom design to it, which honestly brings it to a really fun level. And so after that, we kind of added just a couple other touch ups just to bring a little bit more to the build and just make it look sort of finished. Now, with all that being said, we actually did end up going slightly over the time frame, only by about 20 seconds, but it was still a little odd to see considering I did actually set up a timer. I guess it just didn't go off in time, but what can you do? All right, and that is time, I believe. Might have gone a second or two over. I just had to replace that sign, so I wasn't counting that time. But yeah, let's move on to our next build. All right, so I've gone ahead and done the same thing. I have set up a bit of a setting here, pretty simple. And then I have a bit of an inventory of things. So from this, I'm going to try to be building some form of natural, kind of like mountainous kind of builds. But enough description. Let's just get into it. We have 10 minutes. All right, so here we kind of started off with a very basic outline surrounding the base of our like mountain volcano-ish area. And this is just to start the growth upwards, which sort of can be built upon more and more with more detail. And then, so secondly, here we kind of started to add a lot more to the base ground. It needed to feel a little more lived in. So to do that, we just added like tough blocks, basalts, andesite, just to make it feel very rough, like the bottom of a mountain or the bottom of a volcano would, with all like the falling rocks, falling molten lava that would be coming down from the top. Like all of that would definitely turn up all of the lower down ground. So just representing that a little bit more is always a great thing. Now, here we kind of start building up a little more with just stone, just so that we can get, again, a rough outline of where we are going to start shaping the structure. And then with that rough outline, we can eventually start replacing it with things like tuff, things like cobblestone, things like andesite. All of these blocks we can eventually keep replacing all these stone pieces that we have right now. But just to start off, we just want this basic shape. And with that basic shape out of the way, we can start adding those details I was talking about, that andesite, cobblestone, slabs, stairs, buttons, pressure plates, all those things are just so useful for kind of just making the mountain actually look semi-decent in the first place. Not to mention the addition of lava, which actually brings contrast to what's otherwise been so far a really monotone build, which is just great for practically any reason you could think of. After adding the lava, the time was starting to run a little short. We were about 7 minutes through, and I did get the idea to add some varying smoke levels with hay bale campfires and normal campfires, just to kind of, again, bring a little bit of liveliness to what would otherwise be a really desolate place. And after this campfire setup, we started working on the detail of the actual volcano slash mountain itself. Now we just continued adding more varying blocks than just slab, stairs, pressure plates, buttons, all that stuff. We actually brought in new blocks, and more like tough, more basalts, like kind of more what was on the ground, just to kind of link it up and have that similar connectivity. And after adding those details, we didn't have all too much time left, so I thought I could fit in at least one more thing that could kind of heighten the atmosphere, so to speak. And that is a little tree that I kind of designed just on the fly. And honestly, I think it's one of the better looking parts of the build. It makes great use of the walls, and I'm honestly quite happy with it. And it just helps make the environment show just how dead the place really is. All right, our time is up. Oh my god, it's not great, guys. It's not great. Okay. Well, you know what? You know what? Okay. Let's just move on. We'll come back to this later if we need to, but we're just gonna move. We're gonna believe. Okay, so like these other builds before, I've just kind of gotten a basic ground layout just so it's not sandstone and I'm not spending half of my time replacing these blocks. That's kind of boring. I've also gone and picked out a bit of a block palette here, and you'll kind of see what it's hopefully supposed to be, uh, closing in on the end. And yeah. All right, I got a timer set up here. Let's get started. Nice. Okay, so we're gonna first. Unfortunately, as you can see here, my recording is frozen. Now, I don't really know why this happened, but it kind of caused the entirety of the building process to be lost. So unfortunately, we don't have any footage for me building this build. So I'm just going to have to go through what the build is after, which sucks, but what can you do? Alright, guys, so hi, I'm Post Duke. Just gonna give you a quick rundown on this build because, believe it or not, this is the result of our corrupted footage. Now, there honestly isn't a whole awful lot to talk about, but I'll kind of run you through it. So, we have this nice little terracotta, acacia, and sandstone gradient kind of filling up the wall space. We also have these nice little pillars here, this acacia pillar action going on. And then there is, of course, this nice tough roof, as well as some bamboo further up. Now, if you're wondering why I'm not looking behind, I genuinely don't really want to spoil the next couple of builds for you, just because this is in post after all. So I'm just avoiding showing you all of that. But anyways, in here we do have a pretty homely space, to be honest. We have like a kitchen, a lantern, some tough loom crafting table. We have this functional scaffolding bit. We have barrels, we have pots, we have the little acacia sapling here. We have a nice little outside area where you would do like ranching. Like, you know, the savannah has some of the most spawned passive mobs like cows, sheep, pigs, and llamas on certain savanna. So with that in mind, this like ranching kind of fence style kind of fits the vibe of the build. So yeah, honestly, there's not too much to it. Sorry again that all that footage got corrupted, but this is the results. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with this build, actually. Like, I do love this, like, fence. I love the outside. The inside is a little cramped for sure, but homely nonetheless. And yeah, that is all. Alright, so once again, we've just kind of done a little bit of setup with some water. And just like all the rest of these builds, I've chosen a bit of a inventory to get started with. If it doesn't look a little bit more obvious with the inventory I've chosen, we are doing a sort of ship. Now, as our 20-minute build is a ship, I thought we would use a classic wood spruce. It just has the most variability. It has very, very nice trapdoors to kind of just increase the shaping of the hull of the ship. I am not very confident with making boats in Minecraft. I've never really been very good at it, but through this, I hope to get at least a little bit better. Now, here at the beginning, there really isn't much to it. It's honestly just a lot of setup through the creation of the hull. We kind of have to elongate it, kind of have to widen it, kind of just create a shape that we like and that'll fit in the allotted area, just so that we have a great baseline to then add a sail, to add a cabin, to add like storage, just all the basic things that you would see on a ship. We need the hull to be done first just to give us that vision. Now, jumping forward a bit here, we are starting the construction of the cabin at the back, whilst also adding some finishing touches on the hull and doing a little bit of connection from the front to the back just to keep the build cohesive. Currently, it's felt a bit flat at the top, which has kind of led to the spruce sticking out as being a little too bland. Now, by again just touching things up and continuing to widen the hull, we further increase the shape and the different dynamic that an older ship would have. Like, ancient ships were very not angular. They were very like flowy. They had all these special bits of carvings on them to make them unique and special. So by adding just a little bit of like an indent here or an extruding thing here, it really brings it together in its own unique fashion. Now, after creating the outline for the cabin area, the back of the ship, the captain's quarters, whatever you'd like to call it, we start moving on to the sail. Now, sail's relatively simple, especially for such a small boat, so there's not really much to it. I mean, there's the obvious avoidances. We don't want the sheet to look all gross or just all flat and angular. That doesn't make any sense. This sheet would be flowing in the wind. So we kind of got to curve the wool we're using as the actual sail or the sheet to give it the sense of at least a little bit of wind or something there in the first place. Now, honestly, after the building of the sail, there isn't really much left to do. There's just a couple little bits and bobs, like the finishing of the hull and the filling of like barrels everywhere to kind of show that the ship is at least carrying some form of resource. And of course, the last thing is the captain's lodge, the cabin, the rear end of the ship, basically. And there isn't much to it. All we're really doing is adding a couple walls and then adding some glass so you can see through. Just a little bit. Not much though, and it's honestly great because our time is running quite low at this point. Yeah, so after all of that, and our time is up. Not the prettiest, for sure. There's definitely a very boxy kind of feel to the back. I think though overall I like the sail, I like the just the shape of the bottom generally. I think that actually works very well. I just think this back end's a little bulky. But overall considering I'm very not the most comfortable when it comes to like building ships, I actually think this turned out relatively well. So yeah. All right. So we're here with a slightly different setup than what we've done with our previous builds. So that's mostly because we have a bit longer of a time. We have 25 minutes to get this build done. And I have a general idea of what I want to do. I don't know if it's going to work out exactly in the way I thought. I don't think every single build has turned out exactly how I've imagined. But then again, I'm building them all for the first time, so that makes sense. But yeah, so we have all of these turquoise or cyan blocks. And we've kind of set up a bit of a gradient here. We're going to see if we stick to that. It's more just to kind of just have a look at our block palette if we ever need ideas. But hopefully we won't need much in the terms of that. Now, let's start off right now. So we start off here making a sort of circular shape. Now the idea behind this is kind of eventually to build up the build to being a bit of a gazebo-ish in style, except obviously with not any of the wood that a real-life gazebo normally uses. Now with that in mind, a strong base, just to kind of get the vibe of what the rest of the build is going to be like, is pretty integral in my opinion. I think by putting a value on just keeping the block contrasts very continuous, it'll be a lot easier to complete the rest of the build. So here we start the creation of our pillars. These are going to be our main structural, supports to make the build actually look realistic. Otherwise, it's just will be floaty and awkward and weird. So these structural supports are very simplistic, not honestly too detailed. I actually honestly kind of wish that they were slightly more detailed because currently it's just the usage of the same blocks we've already been using, and I think it would have been honestly more helpful if we'd used a different kind of block. But then again, I was rushing in the moment, so this is how it turned out. Now, after the initial supports, we are going to attempt to connect all the all the pillars together so that it again looks more structural. But I don't know what I was thinking because more endstone bricks. I don't know. It's just a lot of the same block, and it is definitely starting to look a little repetitive. But eh, I guess maybe sure. Go ahead. It's just personally I don't use Endstone very much, so seeing it being used so much here is just really overwhelming. Now, aside from that, here we are finally breaking away from the trend of just deep slate and endstone, which, as you can kind of see, kind of is baffling me. Like, why? But I've said enough about that. We are just adding some cyan, some warped wood, some warped stem, some oxidized copper, some prismarine, just to kind of add some varying blocks, just so it's not all the same chunk of the same two colors. And eventually, by subbing in and subbing out all these different blocks, we'll probably be able to get a very varying color, or at least that's what I was hoping with the build. Now here we're adding a rung of you guessed it, more endstone. I really don't know what was going through my head making this build because like all the other ones they are at least a little bit more variable. Even the one that's only spruce is more variable. I don't get it. I don't know what was going through my head. Now, here I did actually notice that there was just a ton of empty space in between these four main pillars. So I decided to add another four, basically, another four supports, just so that it wasn't just so visually devoid of anything at all. And honestly, I think that was one of the better decisions. Like, if I had left it as 4 pillars, I think it would have looked a hell of a lot more disgusting than it does. So, for that, I guess I'm happy to pass me, but it's still using those same 2 blocks, the blocks that we've been using this whole time. So that's not going away anytime soon. So right here we start the creation of our domed roof. Now it kind of looks a little ugly right now because we're just using concrete to kind of get the general shape. Kind of similar to what we did with the volcano, where we used stone first and then added all the details afterward. Now, honestly, it's probably my favorite part of the build because I don't know, everything else just felt so repetitive. Now, building it, I obviously didn't have this opinion, but now I just feel like the whole build is a little wonky, a little out of place. But the top, I actually really, really love, and I think I love the mixture of blocks, and I want to use this block palette a lot more in future too, which is just great. So I'm honestly kind of excited. This part of the build definitely made me really hyped to like keep going, to keep like enjoying the build, because previous to this I was just like, oh, it's not looking the greatest. But this is kind of where it sort of started to come together. Now, side note here, I really, really struggled making this dome shape. I found it took actually the most amount of time. I think it took overall like 8 or 9, not 8 or 9, more like 7 or 8 minutes just to build the dome. And this is not a big dome, so I think this was actually a really large time sink, which is, I mean, how else can I say it? Annoying, because that means I have less time to make other adjustments to the rest of the build. But at the same time, like, I think it's a valued part of the build, so it's not like the worst thing that like I'm spending a lot of time on something that is pretty integral to the build, right? Now, with the roof done, it was actually kind of a very fast rush to the end. We didn't have much time left. If I remember right, it was only like 1 or 2 minutes, which is practically nothing. And I panicked a lot and I built this really weird looking chandelier thing that I am not by any means proud of. And then I added some like enchantment table as well. Like, I don't know. I was panicking because I honestly hadn't gotten done as much as I thought I would like to get done because of how surprisingly long it took me to do certain parts of the build, like the roof, like the pillars. And this kind of led my mindset to being a lot more rush to get the project done instead of prioritizing a lot more of like the detail and stuff. And it's honestly too bad because of how little time I had left after the building of the roof. My confidence, which was when building the roof, was quite high with the build, just instantly plummeted. And I think we did not end on a very good note, unfortunately. But hey, let's just look at the finished product. So, overall, it's kind of hard to place where I feel about this build because, in one way, I like that I push myself. I'm not normally very comfortable with circular, cylindrical shapes, so I'm glad I kind of push myself there. But also, there's just a lot of parts which are really lacking, like the enchanting table was just added randomly. The chandelier just looks so odd. The only really good part is the roof. And the pillars are like, I don't know. Like, I'm glad I ended up deciding to make this build, but I don't know if I am falling as much in love with it as I am with the other builds that I've made. Alright, guys, so it's been honestly a great episode. I've loved making this. Like, I liked pushing myself. I'm not a very confident builder whatsoever, And just being able to do these little pieces of little building techniques honestly helps me out a lot. So I'm happy with myself. Uh, Let me know if you like this kind of video. It's probably going to be a little longer than normal. At least I recorded quite a bit of footage. So I don't know how it's going to turn out exactly, but I hope you like this kind of video. Maybe it's a little long. Maybe you lost interest. If you didn't, well, you're obviously listening to this now. But I honestly would just like your opinion. Maybe more of this, maybe some other kinds of videos, whatever honestly you guys want. But this has been my attempt to improve my building a little bit through a bit of a building challenge. And I'd say it was a bit of a success, maybe a bit of a success. Um, yeah, but then again, thank you so much for watching, and if you aren't subscribed, it would be amazing. But again, that's all up to you guys. So I will see you all in the next episode.